everyone, this is Danielle and welcome to my channel, A Sprinkle of Joy. Today I wanted to share with you what my family ate for a week. Now, this was actually filmed like at the end of March over our spring break, so some of the meals you see might be a little bit more cold weather oriented, but hopefully you can still get some ideas for them. I had every intention of getting this up and on my YouTube channel like in April, but then April and May completely kicked my butt with all of the activities that we were doing, so I didn't get around until summer. But a lot of the meals you can still have during the summer months, so hopefully this will give you some inspiration on what you can feed your family. Some of the meals are more easy and some of them are a little bit more in depth, but all in all, anyone can make any of the meals that I'm doing right now. So I hope that you enjoy, and thanks for watching. So on Sunday, I realized that we had a lot of random leftovers in the fridge. So I did what I call a CYOL day, which means it's a choose your own leftover day. So the girls had some smoked turkey and potatoes. And then Matt decided to go with enchiladas along with some refried beans and some rice. And then I ended up having some soup that I made with cabbage that was actually left over from a previous meal along with some sourdough bread. This is a great way to use up those small amounts of leftovers so they don't go to waste. On Monday, we had a pretty easy meal planned. I decided to make some sloppy joe, and then I just used Manwich brand, some rice that ended up being boxed for rice from Aldi, and a simple veggie side. For those who don't know, I am really big into meal planning. I usually plan about 2 weeks at a time because I only try to go to the grocery store every 2 weeks, and then that way I know exactly what I need to get. Sometimes things do get moved around a bit, like when we have a bunch of random leftovers in the fridge, but overall we try to stick to the plan. So for these veggies, I drizzle them with olive oil, and then I will sprinkle them with some salt and pepper, and I just pop those in the oven while I'm making the rest of the meal. And too often, I honestly think that people get overwhelmed with making dinner. And I don't think every dinner has to be super fancy, and it doesn't always have to be 100% like from scratch. I feel like even though I'm using canned sloppy joe mix and boxed rice, that I'm still feeding my family something that will nourish their bodies and help them grow. And so while those veggies are baking is when I start the rice. And like I said, I just use some simple boxed rice from Aldi. And then while that rice is cooking, I start to brown the meat. Now this thing that I'm using to brown the meat is from Pampered Chef. And it's this really cool like meat masher thing. Then once that meat is browned, I just add that can of Manwich. I would love to find a homemade sloppy joe recipe, but Matt really likes the Manwich, so if it's not broke, I'm not going to try to fix it. And then I just grab some store-bought buns. This is another thing, I am actually trying to find a good bun recipe, but none of the ones I've made so far have turned out quite as nice as store-bought buns. So for now, that is what we're going to use. And it's an easy peasy meal that doesn't take me long to make. That, for the most part, my kids like, depending on the day. So Tuesday night was pizza night, which is slightly more involved. I made this dough last night and then I stuck it in the fridge to kind of proof overnight. Then today, on Tuesday when I made the pizza, I preheated both of my ovens with the pizza stones in them to 500 degrees. So after I was done kind of stretching and getting the dough ready, I was going to start to assemble my pizzas. Now, I always find it much easier to have everything sliced diced and chopped and ready to go before I start making my pizzas. That way I don't have to take a break and try to chop up the veggies to put on the pizza or the pepperoni. So after I stretch the dough out, I use some cornmeal on my pizza peel to make sure that the pizza is able to slide off of it easily when I try to transfer it to the stone. And I put the crust on the pizza peel. And then I'm going to end up coating it with some olive oil and sprinkling it with some salt and some pepper. So I use a brush and just to try to get that olive oil nice and smooth all around before topping it with some salt and some pepper. Then after that, I am going to put on my sauce. This is sauce that I have already previously made that was frozen, but it's just your generic pizza sauce. That's easy to make. Well, and that little dance was, yay, we paid off my car. So one less card payment to make, which is always exciting. So anyway, after that, I top it with cheese. Now, I love a good cheesy pizza, so I use quite a bit of cheese. And I usually end up using block cheese that I shred myself with my food processor because I find that it melts much easier. This pizza happens to be a half cheese, half ham and bacon, which is what the girls like. Now, it's a little bit of a messy dismount here for sliding it on to my pizza stone, but I got it to work. And since I have a double oven, while that one is baking, I can start on the second pizza. So I kind of start the same way. I roll the dough out and try to get it all nice and stretched out. So I do find that it's easy to roll it at first and then kind of stretch it to get it just a little bit thinner so that crust is kind of a crispier crust. And I'll do the same thing with this as I did with the last one. I'll put some cornmeal on my pizza peel and stretch that dough out just a little more and top it with the olive oil and then some salt and pepper. I need to get more salt in my actual salt grinder, but that hasn't happened yet. Some more of the pizza sauce, lots of cheese, and then this one will be pepperoni. Now this one was a much smoother transfer to my pizza stone. And yes, I also do have 2 pizza stones. So now that the first pizza is done, I would say it takes about like 15-ish minutes to bake, 10 to 15. I take it out, and then I can get started on the last pizza. And then the last pizza I make is a margarita pizza, which is done a little bit differently. So I've already stretched out the dough and I've gotten it on the pizza peel here. So I still do the same thing with the olive oil and then some salt and pepper. But this time I also add on some chopped garlic. Then I put on some thinly sliced tomatoes. And you can also use diced tomatoes. I have done both. And then I top it with some delicious basil. I love when I can make this pizza in the summertime and in the fall when we have tomatoes and basil growing in our garden. It just makes it so much more delicious knowing that it's fresh from our garden. Then after that basil, you put some fresh mozzarella cheese on it. Now, before kids, Matt and I used to make our own fresh mozzarella cheese, which was a lot of fun to do, and it was so tasty, and I would love to get back into that. But this is just mozzarella cheese that I bought from Aldi. I tend to tear the sliced pieces up a bit so that there's a little bit better coverage of the cheese. So then we have the fresh pepperoni pizza that we made. And here is how the margarita pizza turned out, which is definitely one of my favorite pizzas that I make. And I'm not really sure why the camera paused on this for so long, but maybe just to look at how delicious it looks. Now, when I serve the pizza, I usually serve it with a side salad and then some sort of sliced fruit. Usually apples, sometimes grapes, just to kind of have a nice, well-rounded meal that my family does love. So now on to Wednesday. And on this day, I'm making some braised short ribs. Matt and I have been buying half a cow for the past 2-ish years. And if this is something that you have available to you, then I highly suggest doing it. The meat just tastes so much better than the meat bought in the grocery store. And you also get different cuts of meat. So when we got our cow, we would get short ribs, which I had never cooked before. And so I had a hard time at first trying to find a recipe to use that would make delicious short ribs. And when I found this one, it ended up being such a winner. So we have made this about 3 or 4 times now, and it tastes delicious each time. So after you brown, as you can see, I first started by browning all of the short ribs. And then I cooked up the veggies, and it's just used simple veggies like mushrooms and carrots and onions. And then you kind of add everything back into the pot, and you can see I'm adding all of the liquids and spices. And since this isn't my own recipe, I'm going to try to link the actual recipe in the description below. And also, I'd like to remind everyone that when I filmed this, it was March and much, much cooler. Right now in Michigan, we are actually having a heat wave. So I would not be cooking something that is simmered on the stove and then cooked in the oven anytime soon. But I really, really love how simple this recipe is. You just kind of throw it all together and then you put it in the stove or in the oven and you forget about it. If anybody, though, does have a short rib recipe that is good for the summer, you let me know in the comments below. I'm hoping that we can figure out a good way to grill the short ribs because I'm sure that would also taste equally as delicious. So after I've got that all mixed up, I'm just going to add in a few more spices and some bay leaves. So here's how it looks before going in the oven and how it looks when it gets out. And it is definitely a rich braised rib recipe or short rib recipe because the short ribs have a lot of fat on them. And that fat kind of melts into the broth that you're making, which makes it a very, very rich meal, but also a very, very tasty meal. Another favorite that we have is beer can chicken. So I dry brined this the night before, and then when I was ready to use it, I got it and rinsed it off. Now when I make my beer can chicken, I use a homemade Memphis rub. You can use whatever kind of rub you like to use on chickens, and it will all taste delicious. Now when I make my chicken, I use a beer can chicken pan, which is this. It's a simple pan with a well in the center. And that well is where you end up putting your liquid, beer, wine, broth, whatever it is you'd like to use. And I end up putting a little bit more of the Memphis rub into the well so that those spices can kind of get into the inside of the chicken. After that, you're going to have to kind of set the chicken up on top of that well so it's sitting on the well, and then you stuff the neck with some tin foil. Then you put that in a cold oven, and then you preheat the oven with the chicken in it. While it is preheating, that will cook the chicken, and it takes about 2 or 3 hours. So while the chicken is cooking, that is when I start getting ready for making some stuffing. So as you saw, I already chopped up some celery. And then I'm also chopping up some shallots that I had left over. Usually I use onions, but because I had shallots left over, I decided to use those. I melt a whole stick of butter, and then after the butter is melted is when I will add all of those chopped veggies and saute them for a little bit. Now to make this stuffing, I am using leftover sourdough bread that I have been collecting. Whenever I get to the end of a loaf of bread, I usually cut it up and then freeze it so I can use it for things like stuffings and casseroles. And while I didn't show it here, I also add about 2 cups of chicken broth to make sure all the stuffing is nice and moist. Then once it's all mixed up, I will put it into a casserole dish, and then I will stick that in the oven for the last about half an hour of when the chicken is cooking. And then once the chicken is cooked, I enlisted the help of my husband to help carve the chicken up. And you can see that it's got a lot of juice in it still, and it turned out delicious. And I served it with the stuffing and then leftover carrots and broccoli from when we had Sloppy Joe. So the last meal I'm sharing is just a taco night. So we had ground beef that I seasoned with homemade taco seasoning, some Spanish rice, and then here are all of the toppings that we use. We use cheese and lettuce and onion and avocado and tomato and sour cream. And then everyone just chooses what they like, and then you have a very delicious and filling taco. Well, there you have it. I really hope that you enjoyed seeing what my family eats for the week, and hopefully it's given you some inspiration on what you might want to feed your family as well. Then I also wanted to note, you may notice that my hair is a little bit kind of wavy-ish, curly-ish. About 3 weeks ago, I decided that I was going to try to embrace the curly girl method of styling my hair. And while my hair is not curly, it definitely is wavy. And so I was hoping to get more style out of my hair doing this a new and different method. If this is something you'd be interested in me documenting and showing how my hair has changed throughout my course of time, let me know in the comments and I will definitely try to film more videos. But definitely hair is not my forte. I've never been strong in my hair game, but I thought it might be fun to show everyone else what I've been going through and how I'm doing things. So once again, thanks for watching, and I appreciate you all very much. Bye!